Welcome to Straight Talk Soundboard, which is a sounding board where senior technology executives can try out ideas, exchange insights with their professional colleagues, but also a soundboard to amplify those insights and ideas to a broader audience. I'm Paul Hemp, the editor-in-chief of Straight Talk Publications and Events at HCL Technologies. And we're fortunate to have with us here today 5 distinguished executives who are going to talk a little bit about or share their experiences and management insights they've had throughout the professionally challenging and humanly tragic experience of the pandemic, but insights they may have gained about managing people and about managing technology. Insights that might be useful to their professional peers, we hope, on the panel, but also to others in a similar position. So before we jump into the conversation, let me take a minute to introduce our panelists. Our first guest is Shridhar Karale, who is Chief Information Officer at Hypertherm, which makes precision tools and to cut material and metals and cutting solutions. And he is joining us today from New Jersey. Our next guest is Rubo Borno, who is Senior Vice President and General Manager of Customer Experience Centers and Managed Services at CISCO. And Rubo joins us from North Carolina today. Bala Sankaranarayanan is Chief Operating Officer at Thryve Digital Health, which is a company that is developing healthcare solutions in a variety of the changing healthcare world. He joins us today from Chennai. Prakash Kota is the Chief Information Officer at Autodesk, which makes software for companies that, in the company's description, makes everything from smartphones to skyscrapers. And Prakash is with us today from San Francisco. Finally, we have Abhay Chaturvedi, who is a Senior Vice President at HCL Technologies and responsible for the technology vertical within the company, and he joins us today from Dallas. Longer biographies of our panelists will appear at the end of the conversation. So let's get started. What we're hoping is that something that realizations people may have had over their work through the pandemic over the last almost year now. And let's see, Prakash, how about if we start off with you? Any thoughts on remote work, possibly changes in staffing that may play forward into the future, general insights about leadership? Share your thinking with us.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. And good to see the rest of the panelists here. I mean, the pandemic has been real to all of us. And when it hit us, it was almost an overnight decision. I don't know about the rest of them, but it was around March 12th, I believe, when we made a decision on a Friday night saying that we're going to ask our employees in San Francisco to come remote was the first decision. And within 30 minutes, we made a decision the entire global company should be remote. And then I got a call asking if our infrastructure can support the entire global workforce. And my response was, of course, we were already set up for that kind of a thing. So we never missed a heartbeat when we switched to working remote. But what was really important and fascinated me over time was how people adapted to this new change. And again, I expected there will be a lot of noise and people will have their own challenges, how to adapt, take care of the family, loved ones, so much stress, anxiety going on with COVID. And some of them probably could have been infected within their families or whatnot. And there are some countries where people live in joint families or extended families, so the space would be constrained. But all of us came together and figured out how to work the things out rather than creating noise and support each other. That was really a fascinating thing to observe, and how quickly people adapted to this new normal, whatever it was. The good thing was, from a technology standpoint, Paul, we were already set up for such an ecosystem or environment. Again, we are a company that is based over 48 countries worldwide. So we are a truly global company where employees sometimes used to work remotely, but not all the time. But this was a true testament of what we have done from an IT standpoint to set up the infrastructure so that people can all work remotely and still be effective and productive. While tools were there and while people also spent a lot of time as a distraction to work more, but the burnout was real. And that's what, from a management standpoint and leadership, we were starting to get worried. Because when I started looking at the metrics and whatnot, we clearly saw people were spending more time working because it was a good distraction, because nobody could go anywhere else.
Right.
What else will you do with lockdown? So people were really focusing and working. So we as a leadership team were looking at data to understand how can we help employees. And we also, as a company, gave few days off in summer and during winter time frame, additional days where people can take care of this whole collaboration tool fatigue, where people are spending 12 hours and burning out, having burnout. And also, I think this is the time when truly the company cultures put into action, because a lot of us talk about culture being an important aspect. This is the time when companies need to show it in action. And I'm super proud to say Autodesk, from CEO down, we could clearly see the empathy and the CEO reaching out to employees on a weekly basis, and how he also adapted. Rather than doing a broad all hands, he used to do a 5-minute video every Monday morning, like what's top of mind for him and what are the things that are going in his mind and what kind of anxiety he's having or stress because of all of this pandemic. And that really people appreciated, when leaders from CEO down are being vulnerable and sharing their stories, and also setting expectations that you don't need to be perfect at this time. Perfection is the last thing that we should be expecting, and we should be supporting each other. So overall, I would say this is a great thing that what we saw from a people, technology and culture. We have, of course, want the pandemic to be over so that we can all come back to a somewhat semi-hybrid place and start shaking hands or hugging people. We miss all of that. But at this point, from a technology standpoint, whatever we have done has really worked. And the company continues to operate in a significant growth mode.
So, Prakash, one thing I want you to think about, I want to ask the other folks, but to play off what you've been saying, because I think in one of your notes from your interview, things that this experience might affect the way you do things going forward. For example, people often talk about the people have been more productive during this period, but they've also burned out. How does that equation or that balance play out when there isn't exactly a lockdown? And I think one of the things you mentioned was staffing, whether if we have a partially remote workforce, how that might change things. But I want to come back again to what you've learned so far might play out going forward. But Rubo, share some thoughts with us on your experience on managing people in the last year.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has stretched a lot of us. I would say, something that resonated with me is a quote from a fellow young global leader at the World Economic Forum. And she said that what people need these days are these 3 attributes from leaders: empathy, emotional intelligence, and resilience. And, that could not be any more true. But it's certainly being stretched now more than ever. So are we empathetic with our teammates' situation? What is their work-life blend looking like? Is it something that is actually sustainable and conducive to productivity? From an emotional intelligence perspective, are we taking time to step back and see where they are? How are they feeling? What else is going on? What else is taking up mind share as they're trying to do their jobs? And then lastly, resilience. How do we keep going? I think at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was frankly running on adrenaline. My team members globally, they take pride that they are the front lines of digital transformation, helping our customers transform, helping our customers go remote. We had a culture where a lot of people worked remotely already, but many of our customers did not. So they took it to heart to do that. That adrenaline lasted several months. It lasted probably a good half a year. but then they're running on fumes. And so we really had to spend time thinking about how do we keep going? How do we ensure that they are resilient? And how do we as people managers are role modeling that, but also providing that support for them? So it's been frankly, a game-changing experience for me and many of our leaders in terms of what are the skills that we want to continue to show at the forefront when we're working with our people.
Is there the kind of the and this is something that Prakash was saying as well, but if the adrenaline to fumes transition, is there anything in that kind of changeover that might be applied in the future? Any learnings from that kind of inflection point, if you will?
Absolutely. I would say there are probably two key ones that come to my mind. One is there were topics that frankly used to stay out of the professional realm and used to be taboo, and now we address them head on in a corporate setting. So social justice, for example, is now a topic that we discuss on a regular basis and pushing for equality. And in fact, for the first time ever, CISCO published a social justice framework with targets to get to equality from a representation perspective. That's not something we've done before. And I think that being able to have those discussions openly in a corporate setting has been very empowering for our people. And I think the second one, frankly, is making sure that people are taking time to put their own oxygen mask on first. So paying extra special attention to people's mental health and physical health, to the point of not only encouraging them, but I would say very, very strongly encouraging them to work out, to sleep, to take breaks, to meditate. Again, things that normally would have crossed the professional personal boundary before, but now we're very open about making sure that they're top of mind. Mental health in particular has been a huge topic of conversation with our teammates, letting them know it's okay not to be okay. Talk about it, let your manager know, we will figure out a way to work around it. And there are certainly plenty of resources available, and we've augmented the resources available to our teammates from a mental health perspective.
And that obviously maybe is a realization that wasn't so evident before, but will be have relevance even when the pandemic is over.
It's only going to make us better. Companies are made of people, so it's great for us to get back to the human and get back to what really matters to our people.
Great. Bala, any thoughts from you on the managing people in your organization through the pandemic?
Yeah, the one thing that I can say is that as a healthcare enterprise, there were a significant amount of people in our organization who were frontline workers. So we didn't have the luxury of working from home throughout as a family, right? But speaking of Thryve, I think the one thing that I have noticed is that I had to throw literally every rule that I thought was sacrosanct from a leadership perspective out the window. As much as we all speak about trusting our employees, to do the right thing, very difficult to work from remote locations when it comes to handling health data, financial data, sensitive information. How would they deal with it? Working time zones, will employees be productive? The kind of command and control that typically tends to percolate into leadership styles the world over. No matter how much you talk about servant leadership and coaching and encouraging people, there are still remnants of the command and control that sort of creeps in, and you suddenly find out that number one, employees are productive. Number two, employees can self-manage themselves a lot better than you think they can. So it's completely, rewritten the leadership rules. I would sort of say for pretty much all organizations. And the second thing that I noticed was, like Prakash said, people do come together. Now, it wasn't as easy for us to scale our infrastructure up. It wasn't as easy for us to get to the 100% remote. We got to the 96% in a matter of a couple of weeks. But then the last 4% took a long time. I mean, the world was caught with its pants down, right? For want of a better analogy. But look at it this way. The Costco's, the Best Buys, the Walmarts, the whichever store you talk of, were running out of laptops and electronics. Our supply chains were impacted big time. Global supply chain was disrupted, and if you didn't have adequate stock to of laptops, desktops, whichever infrastructure you think of, and if you couldn't supply it to wherever the resources were, and in a country like India, we couldn't just think of supplying them with a laptop. We needed to supply them with connectivity options. We needed to supply them with uninterrupted power options, and we needed to supply them with noise cancelling headphones. Just to name a few infrastructural foundational elements, right? But people did walk that extra mile to make sure that we got there in the end. And I think they stood up for not only themselves, their colleagues, their team members, their organizations in a big way. Be it, to Ruba's point, empathy. Leaders became more human. You sort of had your kids or your pet coming around in the video screens on official calls, and that was okay suddenly. You start off the calls by saying, "Hey, how are you? How are you doing? How is family doing?" So instead of going into, "Hey, this customer, this requirement, this program, where are we? Status report, etc., right?" So I think that was a big, all of us were in the same boat, and all of us were scared, and many of us still are, for ourselves and for our loved ones, and that sort of brought the entire people side of the organization together in a big way.
So just playing off what you said and Ruba said, and maybe Shridhar, you can speak to this. So you were speaking, Bala, in the past tense. We did this, we became that. Will any of these carry over? Do you think this? Some of the sacrosanct rules that you threw out the window, will they come creeping back in, or do you think this potentially was a change in managerial mindset for people? But let me ask Shridhar that question initially, but any other insights that might have come out of it? Hearing what Bala said, hearing what Ruba said, I assume there's maybe some of that in your case. Has anything about managing people changed, permanently as a result of the particular realities of the pandemic?
Yeah, Paul, I think I concur completely with my fellow panelists, and I have a few examples to share, and I will just briefly mention about those before directly go to your question, Paul, if that is okay. I think the most important aspect for me, because I joined in the new company in January, and as Prakash said earlier, that March 12th we have to make the decision. But always, I think we always thought that the people changes are most difficult. It takes a lot of time. No, it happened overnight. When we made a decision, the CEO and the management team sat together. We have to do this. It happened overnight, and everybody was perfectly okay with that. Otherwise, managing the change is a huge deal, So that was a big one, I think, for organizations. Sometimes we talk about it, but when we see in action, when things happen, I think it really become real, and I think become real for the organization, especially the manufacturing companies like ours worked in a different kind of environment for years. It was always face to face, has a tremendous amount of value. And when we saw this decision, it happened overnight. So it was a huge change for us. The second aspect, I will say that, and earlier, Ruba was vocal about it. Yes, I have to give credit to you guys, whether it's Cisco or Microsoft or Zoom or whatever tool you are using. It worked. A lot of people, I used to get a lot of call even in my previous company and even in a Hypertherm. about some minor complaints about this is not working, bandwidth is not okay, VPN connection not working, Teams or whatever the platform you are using is having some problems. But actually, I have to give a lot of credit to this technology company. The amount of effort they put to enhance these digital tool sets is tremendous. And we have to give the credit to them. All these companies have done a tremendous job. And millions and billions of dollars has been saved from the use of tools. I think that is a big deal.
Just to interject quickly, Rubo, we had a meeting the other day, I think of about 500 people on WebEx, and it went off without a hitch. I mean, it was as if, and so I'm just reinforcing what you're saying, Shridhar, that kind of came as it was great that people could rely on those collaborative tools.
Absolutely. And we ran the call with thousands of people on phone, and I think it was perfectly okay. I mean, it's a huge shift, and I think, and backed up by technology, because sometimes people talk about technology. When technology make a difference, it becomes very evident. And this was a good example. This is a good example of that part of it. A third aspect, I will say that Ruba mentioned about the human aspect. Even Bala mentioned about that human aspect. For me, the whole talk about diversity and inclusion, every company talk about it. There are metrics and measurements, all those kind of things. It becomes a theoretical side of it. When it becomes real is in this kind of situation, how people comes together. They understand the situation, the countries or a place or a region, where there may not be adequate infrastructure, and people are working with all sort of diversity. People become more open and honest in sharing their challenges and collaborate together. And that changed, in my view, happened overnight without any management or executive oversight. That is huge in my thinking. Now, coming back to your point earlier, Paul, that are some of these changes are going to be permanent. In my view, some of these changes are going to be permanent. Even for us, we were looking, as we are expanding, acquiring companies, we were expanding, and we were thinking about putting a lot of physical infrastructure or expanding our physical infrastructure in New Hampshire area where we are headquartered. And because of the company culture is all face-to-face, everybody is thinking about the hybrid model is working. So why can't we keep this hybrid model running and design our workspaces in a way that we can optimize utilization of our existing facilities to fullest extent, and let people have the flexible working hours, which would balance the work life in a practical way. And we are seriously thinking about it. Again, it's also gives a level of cost optimization and efficiency on the other side of the business, but it also provides the flexibility for the employee. I think that's one big thing for us, and there are a lot of many others, but I would say this one is big for us, and we are seriously thinking about incorporating that into our next few years expansion plan.
Something I want to come back to in just a second is that idea of a hybrid team, some working face-to-face and some working remotely, and how that might play out in the future. Abhay, share some of your insights about managing people in particular.
Sure, thanks, Paul. So some great conversation on the panel, but what I'll add to it is that, we as HCL, we were in a unique situation when this hit. We had 150,000 of our own workforce spread across the world. And first and foremost priority was to ensure the safety, the security of what they do and making them productive. But we also support about 3 million people across all our customer environments through our digital workplace services. And that was another challenge, to ensure that all of these people stay productive. All our customers stay productive, their works doesn't get impacted. They have the tools and technology. We worked crazily to progress the use case of technologies like CISCO's technologies for collaboration, communication, making them available wherever they had not penetrated. I mean, a lot of places, as I think Shridhar was saying, that it worked very well and it just scaled up. But in some cases, we had to get them new because they had not made those investments in the past. So I think it was, I would say, a tremendously learning experience. From a people side, I think, enough has been said about this, but I think the way I see it is that, the corporate workforce for a long time has been talking about this concept called work-life balance, that, you balance work and life, and you do the right thing for your families, so on and so forth. I think this last 1 year has shifted the whole narrative to work-life integration. All of the workforce has now learned to integrate the two, and the leadership and the organization has learned to realize this fact and give the flexibility to the colleagues to make that work. And lots of examples got talked about, giving flexibility of people to work from wherever they want to, at whatever time it's convenient, and be okay when they are not most productive or perfect or available, and work around that. So that to me was another big learning out of this, as to, how all of us realized that, embraced it, and have made it like a way of working, finally I'll come down to me as an individual. I feel that we've all learned new skills. I think my ability to multiplex now is far higher than what it used to be. Now most of us are doing something, but at the same time we are operating on a texting platform or an email platform, and all of that sort of runs because we know that for the speed of work and outcomes that we need to deliver, which is need of the hour, we need to have the ability to be able to do that. And I think I feel that I have learned a few skills in that respect. I have learned to realize that how much unproductive time I was spending on airplanes, waiting at airports, in taxi cars, and all the stress of running to the flight or finding the right hotel room. All of that just vaporized. I mean, I'm actually dreading the fact that it will come back soon. So how will we manage that? But as of now, I'm enjoying that fact that your total time that you spend at work is far more productive than what it used to be.
That's been one of the most concrete realizations when you think how much time people spend in airplanes in particular, but also commuting. There was a fellow at the LA Times who was on a panel we did a couple months ago who said his 60-minute commute was now 0, and think he had 2 extra hours in his day, which he was actually devoting mostly to work, but it could have been a balance. But whatever the case was, it was a giant net gain. And with that in mind, let's think what of the things you've just been talking about. Certainly, I think the idea of leading with maybe a more empathetic approach than we have in the past. It's become part of internalized into leaders' heads. But are there other things that might carry over into the post-pandemic era? One thing that struck me, I think I mentioned this earlier, Prakash, I think you had said that it maybe changes the way in which you think about staffing your teams. You're not restricted to the Bay Area and Silicon Valley if you have a partly remote workforce. Do you think that's really going to happen and be a change?
Yes. See, one thing is, right, we are also looking at talent wherever it's available. All the companies in Silicon Valley have been restricting ourselves for a talent in a particular pool.
Right.
And right now we have an opportunity to go where talent is available, because we all have stretched the muscle to understand that we can collaborate virtually and we can operate. So definitely we are also looking at the global footprint and not restricting ourselves for a particular location at this point. But having said that, I do think that the world will be in a different scenario, in a true hybrid mode, when we have some people in the campus and some people remote. And how do we work? How do we be inclusive? And see, I think we have all talked how great things are and how technology has solved and we are all survived and adapted. But I also want to probably give the other flavor. when post-pandemic long time, I know there will be a complete new way of how we'll operate, and probably a new muscle that we all need to develop when we have this mixed workforce, some being remote, some being in offices, and some roles. I think that is what will become tricky. I'm sure we'll all figure it out, but that's where I think the focus will be.
That's what the rest of anybody else jump in on either of those 2 points. Will the realization that remote work can be effective and can be employed, will that change the way in which you seek talent in any tangible way? And also, I'm interested in the idea of, you said the word exactly, Prakash, inclusivity, but whether a mixed, we talk about working on a virtual team where everybody's remote or isn't in face-to-face with each other, but what about if part of the team is seeing each other, working face-to-face with all the cues and benefits that brings, and some people aren't? Is that something going to be a challenge in managing to make that team feel cohesive?
Paul, I'll jump in here on two sides of the coin. I've got to just be vulnerable here. I don't think I've cracked the code on building relationships virtually. Virtual happy hours are horrible to me. I just, and especially
they just aren't as fun as the real thing.
Someone is forced to have a glass of wine at like 9 a.m. with a global team. It just doesn't make sense. So I can't say we've cracked the code on that part of it, and I think that's going to be really hard. If anybody's got any ideas, I'd love to hear them. But the inclusivity side of it, I think, is really important. I personally am an introvert, and throughout my entire career, it's always been the speech Olympics, kind of trying to figure out how to jump in a room of a lot of folks who take up quite a bit of space. And I think that technology actually can enable us to be more inclusive. CISCO's mission statement, we published a new one at the beginning of last year, that is to power an inclusive future for all. And our WebEx team has taken that to heart, and in fact is rolling out features that are actually focused on ensuring that those who are sometimes soft-spoken or introverts speak up by tracking who has said something. Have we gotten an opinion from everyone? Also making it more inclusive for people who maybe aren't speaking the language as their first language. So translation in real time, or providing people who maybe don't want to say something, emojis and other ways to express themselves in a conversation and provide a voice. So I think that the virtual experience is actually really exciting from an inclusivity perspective, because it can provide tools and capabilities that you don't necessarily have in an in-person setting. Now it's going to be tricky when you have a hybrid world where half of the people are in a room and the other half maybe are virtual. How do you ensure that everyone feels like they're part of the discussion? And we'll have to figure that out, as Prakash said. I'm sure we will. But for now, the virtual experience I find to be more inclusive actually than the in-person. But I still haven't cracked the relationship piece, and would love to find new ways of doing that.
Yeah, but Ruba, I don't think there is a silver bullet to this, right? In the sense that I think companies have been peer pressured into walking the talk, into being more empathetic and being more people friendly or employee friendly, as the case may be. There are a whole bunch of programs that we can talk about, whether it is emotional health support, whether it is just HR reaching out to employees and checking, hey, are you doing okay? Is there anything that I can do to help? All that aside, if you look at Thryve, we added more than 33% of our organization during COVID. We grew, we onboarded a significant number of people. One of the biggest worries that I have is, how do I make them feel culturally part of Thryve when they haven't even seen the facilities, they haven't walked into the offices, they haven't had the meeting people at the coffee table and having conversation around what was it 5 years ago when Thryve started, the history, the background, the context. Those are things that are difficult to sort of create as part of their onboarding mechanism on PowerPoint slides, right? And also, if you look at digital onboarding, it certainly lacks that human connect Certainly. Onboarding somebody out here wherein you can crack a joke about who you are, what you've done, what your college-going daughter is doing to your mental health, during a coffee break, is just not the same, because you sort of switch off your camera and go grab a cup of water or a cup of coffee, during digital onboarding. So it is different. There is no silver bullet, I think. And the biggest worry that I have is cultural affinity to your organization when so many people are remote. And being remote is going to be a norm, right? That is the new normal. In fact, at Thryve, we're thinking of 40% of our workforce always being remote at any point of time. That's a call we've taken. So it sort of forces us to think through things and think through what can I do to manage and mitigate to a certain extent, at least. I don't think it'll be perfect, but it's certainly forcing us to think through a lot of things.
Yeah, I would say that the whole notion of campuses will change, Bala. I think you are absolutely right. The whole cultural element is a real worry to all of us. But I also think offices will become collaboration hubs, irrespective if there are employees who are going to be remote workforce. Previously, we used to have offsites where we used to go away from offices to spend time together. But tomorrow, offsites will become, everybody will come on site. They'll come on site to have an offsite. And there will be collaboration days monthly where people, irrespective of your nature, whether you're a person who is going to be in office or remote, will be asked to come in to collaborate, to network, to get to know, and then probably decide, okay, you know what, for the nature of the job, you're going to be remote for the next 20 days or so, but some workforce are going to be more spending time in office. I think we will evolve that whole nature of what an office space is and how the office locations are. We are thinking heavily on that to also redesign some of our office space to make it collaboration hubs, so that there is no more like desk space you're sitting in and locking yourself and coding for the next 8 hours. That kind of thing is no more required. We have proved it that can be done remotely. It is going to be more about how do we get to know each other, network, collaborate, innovate, and all of those things where the space will be used.
Yeah. So I think I agree with some of the specific examples, being provided by my fellow panelists. I will just add one thing, that we as a human being are the social animal, and I don't think we can actually replace that the face-to-face interaction as the means to build the relationship. In some shape, form, I think we have to find a way to do that more infrequently than what we are doing it today. So that's the way we are looking at it, So we have some events where we bring people together, build that collaboration, and then start working in a hybrid model. I think that's the way we are thinking about it. The other aspect, coming back to Bala's point, I think certain organizations are making a deliberate choice of virtual organization as the matter of fact in improving their performance from the cost optimization. I mean, that's, everybody's in business, everybody's looking at all options and learning from the pandemic as the way to improve the business performance. Has to give a serious thought, but because completely virtual organization will definitely have a challenge on identity, motivation, incentivizing, all those aspects of it. And I think rather than thinking like a corporate culture, I think we, our big companies, have to start thinking like a nation state. And how do we motivate like a politician? How do we motivate and bring people together? Where people don't get, all the people in the country don't get together, but they are very motivated or not, or engaged or not. I think those are kind of strategies in my view, need to start thinking. So they need to start thinking about like a nation state leaders, how to bring people together. So that's another aspect of it. On the lighter note, yeah.
I was just going to have you restate again that, because I didn't want to make sure I understood that. The difference between a corporation, corporate culture, and a nation state is what? That you're thinking would be more like nation states?
It's like, how do you motivate people in general, your citizens? and there is no one place where everybody gets together, but people are very motivated, based on that. On the lighter note, one of the stories shared by one of the person in my team, and the person came very excited to me, and he said, "No, Shridhar, one of my learning is I haven't seen myself in the mirror this much in my whole life. And my learning is I look beautiful." I said, "Yeah." So I said each one of us had that learning, because amount of man hours each one of us have spent on video and looking at our own face has not been done in our lifetime, at least for many of us. So, on the lighter note, I think that was a good learning. Someone shared with me. I said, "Yeah, I agree with you."
Some of us might have reached a different conclusion, though, when we see our faces. We're horrified.
I'm suddenly thinking, okay, how do I look?
I'm thinking, certainly. But God forbid our leaders start acting like politicians, man, Shridhar. I would hope not. That's a scary thing.
We have to think about, when we think about politician, many a time we think about negative connotation. But the way I was thinking about politician as a leader, there are a lot of leaders in history, or also even today. They are the big motivator for the large population to bring transformation to their way of life. And I think we can't use the negative example, because you will always have negative example and positive example. I think we have to start thinking like the positive.
I get you, right? I was just saying, servant leadership is good enough a term than Absolutely. Bringing politicians in the picture. But Absolutely. Yeah, I get your point.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things I just want to develop on the thought is that, video as a mechanism to communicate and collaborate was not as existent. So I think, one of the things we all saw that the pre-pandemic era, most people will not switch on their cameras. One of the things that I used to notice is that when you have a meeting where 5 people are in a conference room, and there is this one person who's remote, it was a very unequal platform.
Yeah.
That person had to speak up, and unless the person was the boss, then it's a different equation. But then it was very hard for them to participate. During the pandemic, everyone was equal. Everybody was on the same video, and there was equality in that conversation. Post-pandemic, I think we are all saying that some of us will be in the room, some of us will be remote. Hopefully, video and collaboration technology, again, with the leadership of organizations like CISCO, sort of driving that we can use that as a mechanism to bring that equality back in the room, that everybody feels that they are equally part of this, and they are not missing the body language or the tap on the shoulder or to sort of bring all of us together. So that's my thought process, that I really hope to see that all the learning that we've had through this 1 year has a rub off, and that sort of improves the collaboration as we move forward.
That's interesting, whether maybe we've been rewired a little bit in thinking about hierarchies. I just spoke with the CIO of actually Zoom not too long ago, who said a customer of theirs said that the collaborative technology like that was so democratic, is that everybody literally on the screen is pretty much on the same level. There's no hierarchy, and it would be interesting to take part of that in our minds, back post-pandemic, when we actually meet again in person, as you say. Okay. Does anybody else, less on the emotional front and more on the practical, so how are you thinking about anybody who hasn't spoken so far about the staffing issue? Does this open up possibilities in acquiring, in bringing people on board, if you're not limited by them having to be in Silicon Valley, to use Prakash's example? Is your hiring likely to be different in any way?
It already has been significantly different from the old normal, right? I think the world used to be very limited based on the locations where our offices exist, And today we are hiring from wherever talent is available. The challenge is, again, we're going into this new normal eyes wide open, not having figured out the solutions for problems that we know exist around this. So we know somebody's going to be in, let's say, a new location. We know that that person is probably not going to be ever able to come into office, even to collaborate. And we know that we will have significant amount of what we spoke about, the cultural affinity challenges with that person. Yet we trust that we will figure out some solution, to Ruba's point, to fix that vulnerability gap that exists today. But we are going in. We are hiring from all over the place today. It's not going to be easy. We know that, but there has been a change.
Let me thank all of you for being with us today. Some really interesting points. The integration of work-life integration rather than work-life balance. I thought the idea of virtual experience providing a voice to the introverted that might carry over into our next era. Prakash, I think your idea of thinking that you're no longer constrained by geography in seeking talent is an interesting one. So some good thoughts. Maybe we can continue this conversation in the future. It's whetted my appetite to hear more. But I want to thank you all for your time today, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.